Plastic packaging is not going anywhere. It's here to stay. And we're going to talk a little bit about reality, because the reality is it needs to be a little bit more circular, a little bit more sustainable. And we all know that. So we're going to talk, Adam and I are going to talk about how we're going to transform plastics from what is often seen as a problem into actually a business opportunity. So that's what we're going to talk about. I'm Lisa Pierce. I've been a packaging media editor since 1982, and I'll let you guys do the math because I'm a word person, not a numbers person, but it's been a while. And Adam is going to tell us a little bit about himself, his experience, and the company.
So first off, it's an honor to be here, honor to talk with you about this really pressing issue. So Adam Wozniak, Director of Sustainability for Ravago North America. So if you don't know Ravago, you know our brands, whether it's Bamberger Amco Polymers, M. Holland, Entech, Mulestein, you name it, we're one of the largest privately held companies in the world. But what we do see is that me being in this industry, which is really unique, is that I've been in this industry for 24 years. I am a chemical engineer by trade, but I also have a marketing degree. And believe it or not, I went to school to be a pediatrician. So you do the math on how that all works out. What that does mean, though, is that we all have different pathways that we all travel in life. And just like plastics packaging being a problem, I believe that we're not just part of the problem or part of the conversation. We are also part of the solution. So I think it's great to be here. It's intriguing to be here to talk about our experiences. And what's wonderful for working for the organization that I work for is that I've had the ability to be out there on the processing floors. I've been able to work in the production scale, compounding and producing materials, blowing film, injection molding parts, extrusion blow molding components. So whether it's package, plastic to package, or into something else, again, I've been directly involved in those cases, and it gives me a unique perspective to get from point A to point Z much quicker. So it's exciting to be here, and I appreciate your time, and I think this is an exciting collaboration for us all.
Excellent, thank you for that, Adam. And that positions you as the expert that you are. Thank you for that history, but also you're an insider, and so you can speak the language of the folks that are here too, which is helpful to make sure that the communication is actually happening on the right level. So thank you for that. The style that we're going to do here this afternoon is a Q&A. So I'm going to bounce questions to Adam. He's going to field them, and we'll go from there. Adam and I have talked ahead of time, and we've decided, though, that if the topics that we're talking about, obviously we want to still talk about plastics packaging for circularity, but we're kind of open to what topics you guys want to talk about. So as I'm going through these questions, if you have questions that you want to ask as we're talking, please raise your hand, and Mike is going to come around with a microphone and make sure that we hear your question, and we'll go from there. But I am going to start it out. You know, who put me in charge?
By the way, I love that Mike with the mic, so he'll pass it around.
Yeah, Mike with the mic. Okay, apologies, I did not advance the slide. This is who we are. And there's going to be another slide at the end so that if you want to record who's up here, you'll be able to do that. But it's a Q&A. So my first question to Adam, how can brands select or design plastic packaging that aligns with sustainability goals and complies with EPR regulations? And you would think that that's fairly easy to do because that's the same, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a mouthful unto itself. So a couple of things that we've got to deal with. We've got to break this down and digest it into digestible pieces. So extended producer responsibility is a big thing that's on a lot of our minds. And so one thing that we have to take into consideration is that the solution for one company is not going to be the solution for another. And this is why I'm a firm believer that we have to talk about building pathways that are tangible and rational for your organization, depending upon what type of product you produce. Furthermore, extended producer responsibility is not consistent. So if we're talking about extended producer responsibility in the United States, We've got 7 great states with extended producer responsibility that's been written into law. We have 1 that's actually gone fully active where we're starting to see scheduled fees coming through in the great state of Oregon.
Yep.
We have California that's building steam and aggressive steam moving forward with legislation that can be very challenging. And unfortunately, just like the many great states, shapes, colors, sizes, textures, we have many different types of legislation. So these are all tied into eco-modulation. And so thinking eco-modulation, that's kind of like the carrot and the stick scenario. If you design for circularity, if you design for recyclability, you get rewarded for it. Mm-hmm. And that becomes an opportunity for a brand owner. So if I was a brand owner and I saw extended producer responsibility, first I would say, yes, there's a possibility where I might be paying fees based on how my product is designed. But that's a key unifier, and it is a huge opportunity if you take advantage of the resources that are available in the market space today. So Lisa is a resource. I'm a resource. Everybody here is a collaborative partnership resource, and you need to be talking to your peers and talking to the resources that are available to get recommended ideas. Now, from a design perspective, if we break it down on the eco-modulation, it's like reading hundreds and hundreds of pages of documentation. So understanding the construct of whether or not you want to be compostable, whether or not you want to design for post-consumer recycle so it can make its way back in your product, intelligent design is important. So we've got to design early on, because early on, nearly 80% of your environmental impact is determined in the design phase. So intelligent design, think intelligent design first, and that'll take you a long way when you're getting ready for extended producer responsibility. That being said, if I was to say choosing and picking a legislation to work with, look at California as the bellwether and use that as your barometer as to whether or not you pass the sniff test as you move forward.
As Adam said, the EPR laws are state by state, but with California being the gorilla, it's almost like a de facto national standard. A lot of people are going to design for worst case scenario and have that cover for all the states that they sell into. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here just a little bit. Adam, if we're designing plastic packaging that aligns with EPR and sustainability goals, does that mean that every plastic package out there is going to be clear PET moving forward?
Yes and no, possibly, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, to make a long answer short, what we have to look at too is we have to look at the fundamentals of what's really recyclable. So there are a lot of studies out there, so it's important to look at life cycle analysis of these systems themselves. California is really unique because depending upon the size, scale, and scope, every package is not the same. Some is one-dimensional, some is two-dimensional, some is three-dimensional. So looking at your package and thinking one size fits all is not the scenario. Now, that being said, if you're using flexible films, there are going to be some challenges for you as to whether or not that's going to even be considered recyclable in that law. And flexible films, people that are making pouches, are they going to design for a rigid structure? That's a possibility, but there's got to be some sort of pragmatic middle to where we have to look at how to balance that. Number one, the technologies still aren't there from a recyclability standpoint to process films. Films, if they're put in the at-home collection bin, those are considered like rubber bands in our recycling systems where they gum up the system. So there is activity out there. What I can say from an honest perspective is that there are many solutions in process. There is better sortation. There are missing links that are being added to these systems. We have active innovation from our producers and producer partners looking at innovative design to where they can take these flexible films and turn them back into new polymers once again. But we need more. And really what extended producer responsibility is supposed to do is it's supposed to help fund that infrastructure. It's supposed to be there to give those funds that come back to build that infrastructure. The problem is that we don't have anybody or many people preemptively building that infrastructure ahead of schedule. We're kind of in a wait and see scenario. Personally, I believe that utilizing a way to subsidize the cost of these recycled materials might be more beneficial, but we've got to get some headwinds into the market space to see how that happens.
Well, speaking of subsidies, that may be how some of those EPR collected fees are used. We don't know yet. It's still all in flux, in the works. So maybe that'll happen. But going back to just the flexible and rigid question here, again, there's little, if no infrastructure for recycling flexible films. There's pretty good infrastructure for recycling PET, whether it's clear or colored, and we can talk about that in detail if anybody is interested to. But we look at this as designing packaging for the current existing, which is the same word, for the existing recycling infrastructure that we have. Adam, why can't the recyclers just learn how to recycle the packaging that's existing?
Well, again, we live in multiple different systems. We all have to make money. We need to keep the lights on that are there. So, I mean, as a packaging designer, designing for the infrastructure is important. It is understanding. So first and foremost, what I would recommend is that everyone, if you have an opportunity to, go visit a material recovery facility. But don't stop there.
Could we ask, do you mind, with a show of hands, how many of you have been at a recycling facility? Okay, a fair amount. Excellent.
I got two hands over there. That was great.
Okay.
But furthermore, though, there's extra steps that we're finding. There are missing links to this still. So material recovery facility, to kind of put it in simplistic terms, imagine if all of us were working on a manufacturing floor or at a material recovery facility. This is the sheer brute force of sortation and separation. You sort plastic, you sort paper, you sort glass, you sort aluminum. And then thinking about it, it's a very dirty process. Now, we need to advance the technologies too as well. So it's not as simple as, you know what, you do your job, you design for sustainability. For sure, that will create a pool. It'll actually, if you can design taking colors out, if you can design using less fillers, these are all things that actually help boost the quality of the feedstock. But at the end of the day, the technology needs to continue to advance, because in a lot of cases, consumers are very fickle. They are very demanding of how their products look. But at the same time, though, we need to continue to push the technology further. So what I can say is, from a corporate perspective, we still remain being part of the solution. We are actively working in the market space to boost those technologies, where doing a polymer center, which is what I would consider secondary sortation, we have the ability to classify not just PET. So it makes me angry when I just hear, well, only PET is being recycled. Well, PET is number one, not because of it's the number one most recycled. It was just chosen based on how it was classified, but it truly is the most recycled material in all systems. Polyethylene, number two, is not number two because it's the number two recycled, but it actually is the number two most recycled. But then the third most recycled is actually polypropylene. So we're seeing more polypropylene being recycled. We're driving this market space forward. We're increasing technologies to help sort these particular materials and be more aggressive. So capital investment is there. Furthermore, though, now we can actually sort by color. We can actually do a better job and take out all the high density milk cartons, milk gallon, half gallon jugs. But furthermore, we can sort out the very same material, which is a 5502 type, 9596 density, 0.3 to 0.8 melt flow, high density polyethylene.
Easy for you to say.
Yes, but we also know that this laundry detergent container is a non-FDA material because of its color, because of its shape. So artificial intelligence is building, and we're getting better sortation capabilities. So we're investing into technologies with blue polymers, where we have 19 optical sorters, and 2 of them are actually dedicated to the black color. So that near infrared capability, we've got the ability to sort out those black materials to where we can end up with a very nice natural, to where you then could put color back into it and then return back in. But last but not least, though, I also want to add in there, not to get too long-winded, we need to also understand that secondary complementary technologies, so post-consumer recycling, mechanical recycling should be first and foremost, because that is your fastest gateway to lower carbon footprint. You can achieve a carbon footprint reduction of almost 90% in some cases if you can design with post-consumer. But we also understand that if we're talking about MD&M medical market space, you can't design a sterile barrier package with post-consumer recycled materials. So we need other complementary technologies like advanced molecular recycling, like biocircular mass balance, but they all work together complementary. So once we recycle products 5 to 7 to 10 times, those physical properties take a quick slope downwards. And then once we get to that hard to recycle phase, using advanced recycling, used to be called chemical recycling, but we like the term advanced recycling because people don't like the terminology chemical. And in turn, we can turn that back into new products once again for infinite cycles. The issue is, though, is that there is a cost versus balance. So this is why we need extended producer responsibility to help subsidize those costs. And then the other thing that we're facing today is that virgin fossil-based materials, the pricing is so depressed that it's very hard for me to go out there and market a product that's 70 cents per pound more, 60 cents per pound more. So we need to at least be in striking distance to these other polymers so that we can be competitive and so we can also make it attractive to the producers. One last statement. What we also need to know is that as a producer, as a designer, the cost of inaction is too high, not just from an environmental standpoint, but also from an economic perspective. So there are opportunities that are untapped for people from the financial industry sector. If you show that you're decarbonizing, you can actually qualify for lower interest rates because of decarbonization. Or what ends up happening is through the eco-modulation fees, if you design for sustainability, you will not be subjected to the same fees as your competitor. So that can be a leveling opportunity to where you can become more competitive if you're a small size producer or a big scale producer. So there is plenty of opportunity. And I don't get excited about things, I always get excited about things, but I'm very excited about this topic because there are opportunities. And Lisa, myself, and the rest of the industry that's here, we are all here in collaborative spirit to help support and make new products that will have lasting positive impacts for generations to come.
Indeed. So the good news and the bad news of all of this is if you thought there was an easy answer, no. You have but the good news on that is that you have a lot of options. It's sometimes that's where the difficulty comes in looking at all those options, weighing all those options, and making a decision. And not only making the decision, but selling that decision to upper management. And I do have to say, let me finish this one. I do have to say that especially with extended producer responsibility, that's going to become even more important because once companies are paying those eco-modulation fees for extended producer responsibilities, packaging departments are going to get they're going to get a lot of interest from CEOs and CFOs. So if you want to be able to continue to make packaging decisions based on your knowledge as a packaging engineer, just realize that you may have to have some business conversations with the C-suite.
If you need help selling it, please call me. We'll figure that out. Because sustainability doesn't work unless it proliferates from the top down. And we need all levels to be involved because that's critical from an infrastructure perspective, but it's also critical from an organizational decision-making standpoint. I do have to throw out one thing because my legal counsel would kind of put me through the garbage disposal if I didn't say this. It is very important for you to not take any of these messages as warranty, but you do need to consult your legal counsel to understand what is necessary for you as an organization. So whether or not we write an opinion piece about how this system is going to work, it is very important to understand what your pathway is and how you move that forward from an industry level perspective. So I just had to throw that in there.
Yep, all good. So now that we know that the options are still quite broad, how are we going to narrow this down a little bit? Which leads us very nicely into the next question. What's the role of life cycle assessments and maybe even some other science for designing recyclable plastic packaging? And I do specify recyclability here because that seems to be where most people are putting a lot of their efforts these days. rather than compostability, and we can talk a little bit about that. But do you use life cycle assessments or analysis? The LCA could be either assessment or analysis. Which one do you use?
So we as an industry are kind of embracing life cycle assessments. So,
Yay! I guessed right.
So let's kind of break this down into several different pieces of context. So number one, trying to find life cycle assessment for all of your products and all your categories can be challenging. As a producer, it takes a lot of energy to generate all the steps to do an efficient, science-based life cycle assessment. So industry standard, the one that is probably the most accepted, if I was to say what the gold standard would be, ISO 14040, ISO 14044, ISO 14044 would be the gold standard that's out there. Best from an industry case perspective that we've seen. That being said, life cycle assessments need to be kind of understood in context. What ends up happening with a life cycle assessment is essentially a benchmark in time. So if you receive a life cycle assessment analysis which talks about the carbon footprint of the materials that you bring in, scope is important. So if it's cradle to gate, grave to gate is much different than cradle to gate. Grave to grave is a whole nother story too as well. So when you look at life cycle assessment, what I would recommend is you look at it with eyes wide open, not just with one eye, with two eyes, and have others look at it too, because scope is very important. Now, the other thing to take into consideration is that we can give you a life cycle assessment for a PET or a polypropylene that's produced domestically, but that life cycle assessment on a polymer side can be the same for another product that's produced in Asia. Now, what's not contained in there is taking into consideration the scope 3 logistics that are associated with it. So that's where the differentiating factor can be, where you can actually be more competitive in that if you're producing domestically and shipping it from a domestic source, you're reducing carbon emissions because of all those miles traveled. So keep in mind, every mile that 1 ton of plastic or packaging or devices ships in the North American market space in a 53-foot diesel truck equates to 161.8 grams of carbon emissions. Now, if you move that by rail, you can reduce that by maybe 65 to 70%, 67% or so, because the carbon emissions go down to 20 to 27 grams per ton mile traveled. And then keeping in mind this other product coming from overseas, it has to be imported in, so whether it comes by boat, plane, however it gets here, it has to be received into the port and then transferred. So scope 3 is something that's still becoming understood, but choosing local resources. Kind of hearkening back though, life cycle assessment is really how we can set our products apart. And it's a benchmark for you to understand what your inputs are, understanding what the constraints are on these particular products. And then these are the levers that you can pull to reduce those emissions that are associated with it. I mean, again, life cycle assessment is great if we can have eutrophication, if we can have all the other acidification data, but it is a long process. And there is also a cost that's associated with it too as well. So yes, life cycle assessment probably is the thing to push for. If you can get a product carbon footprint, which is to ISO 14067, that would be great. But at the end of the day, collecting the data is really the big thing. We need more resources to support those mechanisms. That being said, from the plastics, polymer, and chemical industry, we are working towards getting that data in place, but it is not still fully commercially available because there is a long process. And then keeping in mind, you can't use one from 2017 and compare it to one in 2026 because efficiencies change too as well. So lots of levers. This is why I kind of don't sleep sometimes. It's why my hairline continues to recede. But again, these things continue to evolve. And again, if you do receive a life cycle assessment, please think of it as only a benchmark in time that is used as a lever to improve over time too as well.
Again, playing devil's advocate. Now, we wanted to keep this broad and talk about sustainability goals as well as EPR compliance issues. But looking at it from an EPR perspective, if the law has already done the work, the legwork to identify what they call the covered materials list, do you need LCAs?
Well, I think in general, LCA is important because really what it does, it actually helps to expose the underbelly of your processes too. So not only are you evaluating your systems and your inputs of what you create in, but what you're also doing with life cycle assessment is you're evaluating your supply chain. You're evaluating who you source products from, and then understanding furthermore the impacts that the logistics have, or the impacts that your manufacturing has, or the impacts that your suppliers create for you too as well. So irregardless of extended producer responsibility, I think life cycle assessment is going to be here to stay. It is going to continue to become more of a commonality or common practice in the market space. And it's something to definitely start to look at from an investment perspective, because it plays a role not only in reducing your carbon footprint, it plays a role in differentiating you from your competitors. And it also plays a role in the financial sector industry too as well, where folks that have the ability to decarbonize are seeing beneficial rates from these lending companies that comply to global reporting indices, so that they're looking at decarbonization as a trigger or a lever to lower interest rates too as well.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for explaining that. We're going to move on to the next step of this, where we wanted to give some concrete examples of what might be considered good, better, best of designing plastic packaging for sustainability and for very specifically the EPR compliance. And so Adam, let's just take, for example, you and I had talked in advance a little bit about packaging for soda pop. And depends on where you live in the country. I think that's why I said soda pop. There's some places that call it soda. There's some places that call it pop. And then I guess there's some places that call it soda pop. So Adam, using that as an example, and or any other examples that you want to give, if we could just talk a little bit about the good, better, best. Like, this goes through the system well, this could be a little bit better, and this is what recyclers really want.
So talking from a consumer packaging perspective is one thing, but one thing I also do want to say is that when we talk about good, better, best, using a scientific hierarchy where you can pull on that life cycle assessment really helps to define good, better, and best, or even worse, because the one thing that we don't want to do is we don't want to see things go to landfill. We don't want to see products go to incineration. So design has a huge impact. And one thing that I always quote, and again, there's dispute going back and forth, but if you look at statements from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, 80% of your environmental impact happens in the design phase. So
80.
Right. So before you decide on all these other factors and even choose other components that are there are limitations that come into play that we have to be aware of. And these are things that we need to be consistently aware of on how this process happens. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about designing for sustainability, think of it as designing for extended producer responsibility too as well. So taking the soda pop, however you want to call it or classify it.
Yep.
If you're going to design effectively for that, you're going to want to take into consideration color, fillers, packaging, labeling, how these things go forward.
And what do you call fillers?
Well, fillers, depending upon what's there, you can talk about if you put talc or calcium carbonate or anything. Okay. I don't know if you're trying to tell a joke or if there was. Anyways.
No, I was serious about the fillers. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, what happens with fillers sometimes is that fillers change the density of the materials. And so in turn, what those fillers do.
And could add barrier.
They add a barrier, yes, they can add barrier resistance. They're done from a weight perspective to add modulus and stiffness, but fillers can reduce the quality of the recyclate down line. Same situation, so can colors. So I'm not telling you to go out there and design everything in clear and natural color, but I would love it if you did, because it would be easier for us to recapture it and turn it back into something new. Again, makes it much more simple. But in the same value, if you think about a water bottle, and not to harp on the producers that use color, think about green color in PET. That would be something that would be not good, better, or best. That would be a worst case scenario, because recyclers don't want the green, or they don't want the root beer brown, because they don't want to make water bottles out of those colors. And it's very hard to recapture there. Now, if you put blue into it, blue might be a little bit more acceptable, because we can improve the L value, make it less yellow, make it more blue, more brilliant. But this is something to consider from a good, better, best scenario, where a lot of producers are already starting to design away from those colors. They're getting their color or their pop through their label or through their caps, but then choosing, even from a medical design standpoint. I'm part of the Healthcare Plastics Recycling Council, and they have design guides that are available to help people design good, better, or best. And so choosing the material has a huge impact that's there. So looking at what's more recyclable, what do you see being recycled? And in most cases, that's number 1, PET, number 2, polyethylene, or number 5, polypropylene. That would be considered in the good or the best value. So I would say that's the best.
Okay.
Or even the better than the best of the best. And then if you choose from any of the other recycling code classifications, that depending upon what it is, if it's a number 7, if it's a PETG, that would still be good, where it has a chance for recycling, but then the amount of mechanical recycling becomes more limited. And then if you choose PVC or polystyrene, that can be a challenge. Again, all of these industries are working to find ways to come up with solutions to get better recyclability. But if you really do the fundamental breakdown, those things will start to highlight what is going to be better practices for you to move forward. So again, I think from a soda pop or a soda standpoint, color is a huge thing to look at. And we're already starting to see a movement away from those colors to ensure better recyclability over the life cycle of those applications.
Yep. One of the things that you talked about, the material selection, the fillers, and then labeling. I just have to, I can't go without saying any shrink sleeve label, every shrink sleeve label should have perforations on it so that it could be easily removed, I believe. As a consumer, as a very diligent recycler at home myself, anything else to say about labeling?
Yeah, labeling standpoint, there are lots of different labeling technologies that are out there. The adhesive that you use actually impacts the recyclability. We try to put these through a caustic soda process where we have mechanical aggregate to actually try and get these to remove. The caustic soda breaks down the adhesives, but if the adhesive is too aggressive where we can't get it off, it essentially deems that product non-recyclable. In-mold labels are great. But in-mold labels, if it's made from an alternative material, not the same material classification, that can become problematic. So if you are doing an in-mold label, first and foremost for bondability, you want to choose same material substrates. And if it is of the same material substrates, you'll get a better chance to recycle it moving forward.
Okay, good to know. I love in-mold labeling as a design feature, partly because usually it's got good tactile effects as well. I want to just ask here in the audience, does anybody have another market category that you want Adam to do a good, better, best example? We talked about soda pop. Anybody else? Anybody have an example maybe in your market that you want a good, better, best? Cosmetics? Yes, yell it out. Flexible films, it's not really a market, but you can talk about good, better, best. Yeah, let's talk about good, better, best for flexible.
Yeah. So flexible films, obviously that is a challenge, right? Because number one, whether or not it gets recycled, that's a whole nother concept and it can be a whole nother session for discussion. Mm-hmm. But flexible films, moving towards mono material is definitely one way to look because it does give you the best overall chance for recyclability. Now, depending upon the water vapor transfer or the oxygen vapor transfer that you're looking for, you've got a design. But if we were to look at that to give yourself the best potential opportunity, mono material would be the way to go if you can be there. That would be the best overall solution. Furthermore, choosing materials that might have a better chance to be recycled in a secondary advanced molecular process can also be considered. So when I think about advanced molecular recycling, there's more than 60 different technologies that are available. We don't have time to talk about all of them, but let's focus on pyrolysis. So with pyrolysis, nylon, polypropylene, polyethylene, those all kind of have the ability to be there. Now, if you talk about the pyrolysis manufacturers, you need to consult with them because they don't like those all mixed, but there is a chance for recapture if you're using those types of materials. But overall, best scale design capability would be to choose something that is mono material if it can be done. Now, what I do have to preface though, especially when we talk about flexible packaging is here because it is so lightweight, it is so cost effective. And we also have to go out there and talk about the marketing benefits of flexible packaging, on how it extends food life, how it extends shelf life. And if we were to get rid of that, essentially we would be running to other issues with food shortages, where we're already diminished on how we can supply food to the rest of the world. So before saying good, better, or best, we really have to understand, plastics are fantastic, not just because they're used in Barbies, but plastics are fantastic because they are so capable of being modified on a molecular level. We can change them to give their higher heat resistance, better flexibility, better ductility. And in turn, this is why my organization has more than 57,000 product references. And in turn, we only have 7 recycling codes that are trying to encapsulate all of them. So designing intelligently on what's more recyclable definitely is something that should be considered to help boost yields and boost purity. But there also is a purpose as to why plastics are fantastic, and as to why it helps you to design miniature devices that I wear to stay alive because I'm a type 1 diabetic. So if it wasn't for plastics, I wouldn't be here in front of you today. So we also need to put the positives out there that are there too as well. So yes, you can design, if you can design with mono material, but that's not going to help every application. So this is why what works for your company and your product is going to be different. And this is why we have to build creative pathways for everybody as a solution moving forward in a collaborative nature.
Mm-hmm. And new developments are happening daily. I don't know anything about it, but I do know there's a new coating out there for flexible packaging that improves its barrier. So it's a coating. You can have a monomaterial flexible film that is just coated where it doesn't interfere with recyclability, and you're getting the barrier that a lot of the foods need. I don't know anything more about it at this point, but Packaging Digest will be looking into it, so I'll have more on that a little bit later. We're getting close to end of the time here. I do want to take questions from the audience if there are any questions, but what I wanted to do is queue up the last question that we had prepared for this before we took questions from the audience, in case nobody has any questions and this is an area that you want us to explore. So any questions from the audience at this point? Burning questions from the audience. Okay.
Hello. I would like to ask about your opinion about compostable materials, especially made from natural, plant-based, renewable materials. Thank you.
So compostable, there's many different levels when we talk compostable though too as well. So first and foremost, from just an intelligent design perspective, having something that is compostable, if it's bio-based. So first thing I need to caution everybody, just because it says it's bio does not mean it's compostable. So that's something that needs to be understood. But from a compostability standpoint, there are challenges for compostable materials. So compostable has many different terms: industrial compostable, at-home compostable, biodegradable. They all mean different things. So we need to be able to define those into context of what we're looking for. Furthermore, understanding about these compostable materials, there's challenges. So trying to get something that has a good barrier characteristic and then still allowing it to break down in an environment is very hard to do. So again, it's very application specific. Are there advancements? Yes, there continue to become more advancements. Legislation continues to become more daunting depending upon what the secondaries are left over. So if you look at the nuances of extended producer responsibility, there are concerns about what's going to qualify now depending upon the chemical signature that's left over after it composts. You can use it if it actually creates a nutrient for the soil, but if there is no nutrient-rich leftover remaining segment, it may not be reusable. And again, you're going to have to go back to your legal counsel to kind of digest that, but there are challenges there. The other thing to think about compostable materials or biodegradable materials is that they typically have a higher density than most materials. So you have to think about that weight versus value perspective. And then processing can become more challenging. So unfortunately, they don't necessarily drop into every solution, nor do other recycled solutions. So we have to be cognizant about what that means, processing changes, thinking about it from a design characteristic, and then consulting to industry experts to support those in there. So There are plenty of benefits that are there to it, especially if things aren't being collected. But we also have to think about the secondary handling, whether it's industrial compostable, at home compostable, and then also whether or not it's actually a benefit to the soil nutrient and the fauna that's in those areas too as well.
Mm-hmm. Adam is being very diplomatic here, talking about compostable packaging. I'm going to be a little bit more blunt. He talks about challenges. There are composting in the U.S. for organic material is going to continue. It will. But the vast majority of existing composters prefer not and do not accept compostable packaging in their facilities. There are very few compost facilities in the U.S. that want packaging, take packaging, and there's recently been additional activity in that area that will make it even harder for compostable packaging to find a place in compost facilities. I don't have I don't have it memorized, but it's the National Division of the USDA just recently kind of like decategorized compostable packaging for acceptance into its program. And the compost industry, compostable packaging industry, BPI, Biodegradable Plastics Institute, I believe, BPI, they're fighting it, but it's going to be a little bit of a battle, and partly because that's on the regulatory side of things, but just from a business perspective, compostable packaging doesn't impart any nutrients into the organic compost, which is the product that compost facilities sell. So it's market related as well.
And so again, that depends on the science, and I'm a firm believer that the science and data will set you free. There are some compostable materials that do show and have proven to show that they do create nutrients, but not all, and it's very application specific. So again, I am trying to be as diplomatic as I possibly can be, but we'll go from there.
Bless you, Adam, for continuing to correct me on that, because he and I, we've had this conversation before. Another question, Jamie.
You sort of advocated for perforated things, which made me wonder how much of the responsibility can you reasonably expect from consumers?
Okay, the consumer, if I can take just a moment to answer this, and then I'll let Adam give his perspective as well. There are some people who think the consumer shouldn't have to do anything, that every package that's made out there should go into a collection area, and it's the industry at large that's supposed to figure out how to make it all work in a circular economy. That, I guess, truly nirvana, isn't it? Wouldn't that just be nirvana? But there are a lot of LOHAS folks still alive in America, and that's LOHAS is the acronym for the lifestyles of the health and LO lifestyles of health and sustainability, I believe, LOHAS. And these are folks who believe in the environment, improving the environment, who like to recycle, who encourage other people to recycle, maybe a little bit too diligently. But if there's a zipper on a perforation to where you can easily remove the label, and it says, zip here to remove the label before recycling, I think some consumers at least would do that. But that's I would do it. I would do it.
So I'm going to kind of talk this in more of a holistic perspective.
Okay, we have 6 seconds, but go ahead.
Well, we're going to take more than 6 seconds, but irregardless, I believe that we all play a part in this. So what really has to happen from a sustainability standpoint is that we have to have consumer, brand owner, legislators, all crash into that same intersections. Producers need to be part of the conversation. NGOs need to be a part of that conversation. And we all play a part in that. It's not as simple as, hey, can you do this and can you do that? Or is it going to be a one and done solution? It requires everybody. And what I have to say is it's the small steps, the small nudges that we can make with the consumers, with the producers, with the legislators. There has to be a pragmatic middle. And we have to find a way in using science and data to substantiate what we do. It's with that data, that's why life cycle assessment is so important, so that we can make benchmarks and shoot for the stars and see how we're actually progressing in those processes. And it's in these small steps that we make today that are really going to power the leaps that mankind needs for a better tomorrow. And that's really where it's at. So listen, we're all here to make new creations, and we want to make new creations that have lasting positive impacts for generations to come. And that requires not just me, it requires you and all of you, consumer, brand owner, designer, legislator, to play their part.
Yep. I'll ask one last time, any other questions from the audience before we wrap this up? Going once, going twice. Okay, please join me in thanking Adam for sharing what's in his mind and in his heart. Thank you, Adam.
No,
And
we
let's
appreciate.
let's also thank Lisa for helping to pose those great questions to Adam and be part of the panel.
Thank you. Hope you guys have a fun night here in Anaheim, California. Enjoy the weather.
Yeah, and don't forget at 5 o'clock,